Hi, thanks for joining me today. My name is Lindsay. I'm the designer behind Doing the Most Design, and you can find me on Ravelry at LindsayDTMD. I can't wait to show you what I've got in store for you for today's video. Let's talk about the materials and tools and equipment that you will need in order to make this hat. By materials, what I mean is that in your finished product, what are the physical objects that are in the hat itself? So primarily we're talking about the yarn, we're going to talk about the beads, and we're going to talk about the snap button poms. And then at the end of this video, as I mentioned, I'm going to have a little segment where I explain the colorways and the fibers that I'm using, and then give you an opportunity to think about also different types of beads that you might want to select for your project. The pattern is written for two colorways and features two colorways. For the tutorial videos that I will film, I'm going to be knitting a brand new version of this hat for my friend Adam. So I've selected these yarns here, and I'll be talking towards the end of this video about the fiber content of these yarns, their colorways, in case perhaps you want to purchase these. I'll also be talking about maybe some tips that you can use for selecting the colors that you want to use, but we'll set these aside for right now, and we'll do that deep dive towards the end of the video. Up next, if you would like to add beads to your project, you will need some beads. Here I have a vial that I bought just the other day from Michaels. Let me zoom in much more closely here so you can see what this says. So this file right here is 6/0. These are sometimes called check seed beads. I was years old when I found out that these were check seed beads. These, if you look for these on like Amazon, for example, which is where I bought these beads, they can also be described as 4.0 millimeter beads. And what that says is it's the like width of these beads. Oh, I have fluff in here. Pardon my fluff. Okay. All right, so it is not an absolute requirement to have containers like this. You can see I've selected two different opaque but metallic beads, so they're going to have a high shine to them. Along with the beads, if you do want to incorporate those, I highly recommend that you get a small container of whatever you have available. This was, oops, there we go. This was a leftover component from like a silverware organizer that I got from a big box retailer a couple of months ago. It's recommended that you get something that has smooth corners and sides to it, because when you are trying to pick up the bead, it may not always be as simple as scooping it up. So you see me, I'm not trying to be intentionally bad at this. It actually can be a little bit of a struggle. So what you might find is simpler for you is to find a bead that you can get your crochet hook into, stab all the way to the bottom of the bowl, and then slide up on the edges like this. If you want to incorporate the beads, then you will also need to use a crochet hook, or if you have some other way to pick up beads as you are working through. This right here, if we can barely see that, it's a 1.0 millimeter crochet hook. And if you can't tell, the hook is microscopic. It is teeny, teeny, tiny. However, this is kind of the sweet spot for what we need. So as you can see here, when I pick it up, I have enough room to kind of move this crochet hook around, but there's not a whole lot of room to play around with here if you look down the center of the bead. So when we are thinking about maybe changing this up, you could technically go larger on the bead, but I do want to caution you, because whatever bead that you place on the front side of the fabric, you're placing a matching bead on the inside. So you can see here when I push these stitches aside that the beads are side by side when you're actually knitting them. I think if you go too much larger with the beads, then they might distort the fabric a little bit, or what might happen is if you've selected a size that's too small and it has a lot of stretch, you'll be able to see the bead from the other side of the fabric through the stitches of the side of the fabric that you are wearing as the exterior. Of course, we will need the snap buttons for the poms. So here I have a single button, but this came in a kit with a lot of different pom colors. And then it came with all of the bottoms for the pom-poms for the snap buttons. As you can see here with this pom that I just pulled out, this already has the top of the snap button sewn into the pom. So there's like not solid, but there's a dense core on the inside where all this tuft is coming out from. And then somebody has just gone ahead and like sewn in one of the top snaps. So if you see the orientation of this button, this looks like this should be the top of it, but actually it's this side that's the top of it that you have to snap down into with this sort of like, man's nipple on a cold day looking thing right here. So I did like this kit because it offered me a variety of poms. So if I do end up designing more hats in the future, then I can add some cool, interesting colors into that will match those poms. If you don't want to buy a kit like this and you just want to buy the one pom, you can get a little crafty and perhaps buy your own tufts of, your ball tufts like this, and then get a kit like this with just the snap buttons by themselves and sew in. So hats off to you if you want to get crafty with it. Moving right along, let's talk about some of the equipment that you will need. I already talked about the crochet hooks that you might want to use in order to add the beads. But now let's talk about the other tools and notions that will be necessary. So obviously this is a knit project, so you are going to need some knitting needles. And as you can see here, I have interchangeable needle set. I own the Haya Sharps, which was a special request Christmas present that I made a couple of years ago. I'm using the 24-inch cord that comes with that kit. Even if you're making the size A, which is 16-inch circumference size for this hat, I do recommend that you use maybe a 24-inch and do magic loop. There will be plenty of times that even me making the largest size, I'm going to need to use the magic loop method. I'm going to start out with on the brim using size US2, which is a 2.75 millimeter sized needle. Now, this is what is recommended for the pattern, but as you know, if you need to go down a size to obtain gauge, then go ahead and do that. Make whatever alterations you need to in order to obtain gauge. And here in the body, if you have not made a project before that has a brim or a cuff or a hem, and then the rest of the garment or the accessory, you'll need to go up 2 needle sizes for the hat. So that means that we'll be using a US4 for the body of the hat, which is a 3.5 millimeter needle. Now, if you have an interchangeable needle set, I highly recommend that you take advantage of the fact that you can interchange your needles and also pull out your size US3, which is a 3.25 millimeter. And I recommend that you use the 4 on your right hand needle and you use the 3.25 millimeter, the US3 on your left handed needle. I'll explain towards the end of this video why I'm making that recommendation. And then this is also optional, but stitch markers. So because I'm making the largest size of this hat, I know for a fact I need to cast on well over 100 stitches, and I lose count super easily, and I don't like to lose my sanity as long if I'm going to be losing something. Let's not lose that. And so here I have some counting stitch markers. Within the pattern itself, there is one call to place a beginning of round stitch marker. I like to do my fancy dangly ones, the ones that look like earrings. And then I will also have for myself 2 stitch markers because the repeat for the motif, as well as for the sections for the crown, there are only 3 repeats, so I need 2 additional stitch markers. You'll need some tapestry needles because we are going to sew on the snap button into the hat if you would like to add the pom. And then just scissors. I think it goes without saying. But you know what? If you like to break your yarn with your teeth like a caveman, this is a safe space for you. All right, my last little doodad here. This is super optional, but I just want to point out that it might be very, very helpful for you to have a spare crochet hook that is a big enough size to actually pick up fingering weight yarn. That 1.0 millimeter is not going to be helpful for what we need to do in case we drop a stitch. So this little doodad right here, this is just I love this tool. I use it quite a lot. It's a Susan Bates multi-tool. I don't actually know the proper name of it. I've seen a lot of YouTubers that have this, and I've been intensely jealous for years. And then I realized a couple months ago that my local yarn store sells some of these. So I grabbed one. And in case you haven't seen one of these, it has a crochet hook on it. And then on the other end, it has a knitting needle. The knitting needle itself is like very close to a size 4. This might be like a size 3. I think it's very close to a size 3. The multi-tool might come in different sizes, but I primarily knit in fingering weight yarn. So this is a perfect size for me. And then if you don't have an extra If you don't have this multi-tool, then maybe just pull out one of your smaller needles from your interchangeable needle set, or have one of your spare straight needles on hand. And that way you can have just one more little implement for picking up stitches in case you drop something. Or it can be a little bit of a stitch holder. That might be a recommendation, that you might need a stitch holder down the road if you're not confident with just kind of dropping a stitch and holding it in place with your finger. And then the crochet part of this is very close to a crochet hook size, a 2.75 millimeter hook. These are going to be comparable to each other, as you can see there. And this is, again, just a little bit of a safeguard. This multi-tool in particular, I'll be using this often as sort of a pointer, and for lifting up stitches, so that you can see much more up close and personal the stitch that I'm trying to explain to you. So these are all the tools and materials that you will need. Now I'm going to move into the part of the video where I talk a lot more in depthly about the choices that I've made for fibers and for beads, and then give you some ideas and considerations so that you can really add your own personal style to this hat. Thanks for making it to the end of this video. If you have not done it yet, hit like and subscribe so you can be notified when I put out more content for you. I'd love for you to connect with me on Ravelry at LindsayDTMD. Check out my link tree for a collection of my projects, and if you're able to, leave a cash tip for me at my Ko-Fi page. All links are in the video description below. Don't forget to be kind to yourself as you learn, and thanks for spending your time with me. Bye!